Right now is the most critical time for us to take back control of our food supply and become self-reliant by having our very own food forest. Transform your yard into a food forest and create a system of self-reliance that's easy and enjoyable with our friends at Food Forest Abundance. No matter where you're starting from, you can become more self-reliant. You can take your self-reliance to the next level by becoming a producer of your own food through growing and foraging. Learn how to turn your property into an income-producing source of economic self-reliance. If you're ready to go off-grid, click the link in the description and use coupon code FORBIDDEN for discounts on your very own food forest with Food Forest Abundance. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guests are Andy Rouse, Joakim Hagström, and Danunnaki Dan. First, a couple of announcements. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. This is the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, where you find some of your favorite podcasts from our community featured. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Our social media is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rokfin is where you get our premium content, as well as all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin for only $10 a month. You just go to rokfin.com/FKN+. That's ROKFIN.com/FKN+ to sign up now. Finally, if you would like to help with the documentary production, anything is greatly appreciated. If you'd like to help with the donation, you can go to supportfkn.com, or we have a PayPal link in the description. Any donation of $5 or more through supportfkn.com, you get access to Cory Hughes' secret JFK forum and tons of information that will and may not be going into his upcoming book. Today I want to welcome Andy Rouse, Joakim Hagström, and Danunnaki Dan. Andy is the host of Deep Share Podcast, Worship in the Storm, and the New Roots of Creation podcast. Joakim is a researcher, and his YouTube channel is Joakim Hagström. And Danunnaki Dan is host of Rising from the Ashes podcast. Gentlemen, welcome. How are y'all doing?
Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Been looking forward to this, man. We're going to be discussing a lesser-known human origin story called the Bock Saga. Andy, the first time you were on, we touched briefly on this, and I heard you guys on Sam's show, and man, I love Sam, but he didn't let you guys get out enough of the story. So I'm looking forward to this today. I haven't had time to go check out your own series about this on your podcast, so we're going to try and lay out as much as possible with the time that we have. But first, let's do some brief introductions for everyone. I know, Andy, you've been on before, but just tell us about your podcast, what you guys have going on, and we'll get into this.
Cool. Yeah. I'm Andy Rouse from the Deep Share Podcast. And I talk a lot about ancient history, symbolism, consciousness, a bunch of different topics over there. But formed Roots of Creation with these two gentlemen a long time ago. I haven't done too many episodes on there, but we've been exploring the Bock Saga and other areas of history. Through many different podcasts and stuff like that.
Perfect. You okay?
I'm sort of doing all kind of stuff. I recently been working a lot on YouTube with a guy called Caleb, and we have been going through the more draconian. It's sort of my research sort of originates from Bock Saga, but I gotten more into the modern aspects. of it. But yeah, I like to pursue different kind of things. I'm a musician also, so I have a lot on my plate. But the Bock Saga is really one foundation stone for my all kind of stuff that I do. It's a very handy tool with the sound system and this.
Right on, man. Excellent. And Dan, what you got going?
Danunnaki Dan, rising from the ashes. On our show, we just we dive deep into different topics of history, ancient America, Egypt, consciousness, God, divine feminine. We take a month, or sometimes two, to just talk to as many people as we can about that subject and start to try to, I don't know, map out a little bit better, like what the like idea is of that. Dude,
Perfect.
I just woke up.
No worries, man. All right. Well, hey, I think a good place to start with this would be wherever you think we should start at the beginning. Let's get a synopsis of the Bock Saga from whoever wants to give it in there. And if you have anything to add after, we'll go for it.
It starts with the sound system, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's this humongous thing that they just keep, the Bock Saga, at least for me who lives in Sweden, it's just it's so rooted into the foundation of everything here, because the Swedish language is a native heathen language. The English language is also a sort of a heathen, but it's a more modern. This is very primordial, it's very natural. So you don't even need to sit at the computer researching. You can go and research this in your daily life, or it becomes like an exploration, just going with the car through Sweden or whatever. So the Bock Saga is so immersive. It's a worldview also. It's like a complete different, or it's a complete system, a worldview, and it contains everything that a civilization needs, all aspects. And it sort of is the heathen world, but it's very described into details, because the entire system of the heathen world is stored and contained within the language and the sound system. The sound system is basically the Swedish alphabet. So it sort of branches out from there.
So the basis of this story is based on language and I guess the powers that come from it, right?
Yeah, but also it's an understanding of human, what do you call, anatomy. It branches out from the human body, really. So, but the sound system in itself is like a civilization blueprint also.
Yeah, and it's like fractal, where it's like, because it starts with each letter having a meaning, or each pure sound having a different meaning, you kind of have to follow that rule for each letter throughout when you're putting letters together as well. Is that a good way of putting it?
Well, maybe we could get some examples to help the audience understand.
Yeah, but this is a tricky one.
Well, the problem is that they don't use much letters at all. It's an oral tradition.
True.
that has been passed down, and people say like oral tradition, oral things that change over time, but because it balances, checks itself within the sound system, you could say, it sort of get fixated with the sounds, because if you change sounds, you can see corruption.
So it's kind of like you have to, like, in a way, sing this story in certain tones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the boxing. Yeah, it's if you start with the E, like in the alphabet, it starts with an E, and that is very symbolical also, because if you take like a compass, one dot and then put a line out, that's how you draw the first ring. But in this the E, A, B, but it's like E Asersborg, as in Aser's castle. It begins, and if you follow the alphabet, it's going to continue and unfold a story. And it contains, it's a class system based, like pyramid structure. type of society. So, much the Western world, the European world at least, is I would say very based, or it originates from this kind of structure that unfolds in the book Saga with the royalty and all of this.
Well, maybe we could get into. Well, anybody have anything to add to that before we move on?
The example is hard.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of them right now because it's not like there's a lot of good ones to use. It's
but it's sort of, if you have like in the sound system, if you do like the E, A, B, C, D, E, it has those fixated sounds. And if you try to create a word or a sound from that, for example, if the O and the U has been changing a lot and it doesn't really affect, but that's the more corrupted variant that is easy to understand anyway. But for example, if you have a word, you have to be aware of the book Saga or the sound system to be able to spot the corruption also. So, right. But it has to do also with natural associations within the brain. So if a word gets corrupted, if you say we had this kind of language that has been quite perfect for over 100 millions of years, we say the human race has been having some kind of language system. And from this book Saga perspective, it has been, it's portrayed in the book Saga that this has been going on for over 100 million years, that the human race has been staying very much, accordingly to the sound system, at least 50 million years before the first Ragnarok. But we can sort of see within the sound system that every sound has a meaning, and the association within the human being sort of has a natural correspondence to that sound, for instance. And if you start to turn those things, we can get a wrong association. You say that, it's very common that the children does the complete opposite of what you say, for example. So maybe some words has been flipped in their original meaning, for example. So
also like the letter A in the English language into the Bock Saga mythology, it would be, that's two sounds. That's not just one sound. It's like A and E.
Okay.
Yeah.
The A, B. Yeah. A. You have the E there also. Yeah. Because A is a clear sound in the Swedish. But this is very complex, and we will get people, listeners, very confused when we start to talk in this kind of detail. But it's more of a, it's sort of, if you come from the book Saga perspective, you can see corruption within words.
Yeah, they talk about when the black ink hits the white paper. So that's, that basically suggesting that when pronunciation starts to change and the spellings might have changed here and there, the old ways, the old story could kind of be hidden in plain sight almost, I guess you could say, or maybe it was on accident. Maybe it was a game of telephone. I don't know. Yeah.
Translations over time also corrupts, I think. If you translate or do a sort of interpretation of an old text, you will have the modern mindset that you refer to. So a lot of this kind of old text that they're talking about, they speak about aliens, for example, that is kind of been corrupted because of the fantasy and the understanding of the worldview of that time, so to speak. So
now this is basically saying that this language created everything from there, and that these were sort of like progenitors of the human race that came out with this language, or was the language there before?
Sorry, go ahead.
No. The language came first, or the human being obviously first, then the language.
Okay.
In this story, it was Frey. When he was 7 years old, he got the language. But that's a different story. But
so the people are actually a different story. How do the actual end of the progenitors, these people, come into this story?
don't they describe it like it basically came from the nature, from Udin, which was the sun? Like basically, to me, I'm taking it as like really the progenitors of humanity, as in coming right up through evolution. And like I almost feel like this is a story of the missing link in some ways, where it shows this form of human being that was way more in touch with nature and the natural progression of things, if that makes any sense. So this language almost suggests like natural behavior almost, or patterns or something. I don't know. It's again, it's very complex.
I think the old, I've heard that, in the heathen world, they do a lot of like ceremonies and have the circus with when they dress up as like animals, and they knew sort of that the human being was sort of a strange creature that had sort of skipped evolution, or the more natural progression. Like animals are very instinct, and they are really a different. They are so estranged from the human being, or it's the human being that are estranged from nature. But I think it has to do with this story from the, they talk about the human being coming from the goat and the monkey. But somewhere in there, there's a third component also, which is Odin, or they call it Odin, but it's also the sun, because within the sperm that the male human has, they have a different word for the sperm from animals, for example, that within the sperm is also a part of the Odin, or the person, or we are a part of the sun also. That gives us the ability to use language like we do. I don't know how, with the whale world, they have also a very complex type, but
well, it's more of like just a primordial type of communication, other than just language as we understand it, right? It's more of frequency and tone and what's behind it, right? I would say so.
Yeah. But we can't really possibly go into the mindset of the first humans, but
it may have even. It seems like it might have even consisted of like psychic communication or different consciousness abilities that would connect the languages to the different sounds that were being made.
I have no idea how they would put like Aser, for example, and Beabori. This requires some kind of thought process to come up with the actual name or meaning for the different sounds. But there's a guy who's dead now. Cliff Barber, he made this kind of flower of life structure where he could find the alphabet within the rings and sticks geometry calculation also. So there's some kind of natural order to this, and maybe human beings had more time and free time before, so they could explore those things.
Well, there's also an entirely different cosmology surrounding this story, isn't that right?
Right.
Maybe we could get into that a little bit.
Yeah, our sun is the only sun in the solar system, so to speak. It's a very different kind of, because it's Odin, it's the source to all, to everything that we see around us.
Yeah, it's the beginning of sun worship, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think they had this kind of concept that we have galaxies upon galaxies. I don't know.
Do you think these were the first advanced humans to exist?
Well, I think they might have gotten there, but we could go into like the cycles in the story of what happened in his story, where like they could have become advanced, which that kind of brings in, I don't know if we mentioned it the first time around, but that kind of brings in one of the destructions where they call that time period Atlantis. And that's basically our explanation for like Atlantis in a way. But
what is advanced? That's the question.
Right. Yeah. Like we think.
Well, it's probably different. It's not like the technology we see today. Nothing like that. I imagine it would have to be something more of a consciousness based and frequency and energy.
Evolved. Yeah, nature.
Yeah, but very, if you have perfectly knowledge about nature and creation, I think they were really good at creating new kinds of plants and animals, for example. And this kind of breeding, because inside of the Bock Saga system or the language is a breeding program that is very complex and advanced also. And some would say that it's very much like an anthill, that is a very organized, structured society. Like an anthill, for example, if you really study ants, they are really complex. And yeah, this kind of more natural order to everything that has been calculated from the start via the sound system or the language that has been created from the sound system. This E, A, B, C, D, etc.
Just to go back to like the sound system a little bit, I got a quote from Carl Borgen, who wrote a book, the book on Bock Saga, which was kind of dictated to him by the main storytellers, but they describe it in a pretty clear way. Since the meaning of the sounds are fixed and cannot be altered, the saga can be passed on to the next generation without any changes in its purest form. Just as mathematics is the language in which the natural cohesion between numbers is described and can be thus passed on, so is the root language the natural means of describing the Bock Saga. When in symphonic music, a discordant note is played, you can immediately hear it is not in harmony. The same is true for spoken words that do not fit into the Bock Saga. When names or facts are given that are not in harmony with the sound system, we know it does not fit into the story and is fictitious. The sound system is carried by the root language.
So the sound system, what we've been discussing, is just a way to tell this story to where it's not BS, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now I got you. Now what?
So you can already kind of hear the idea of like the Tower of Babel kind of built into this story. If it's like this hidden, lost history, why would it have been hidden, right?
It's the heathen history.
The heathen, yeah.
Perfect.
It's a lot about phonetics.
Well, now that we got that, let's get a synopsis of the actual saga. Where does this begin? What is behind this all?
Where does it begin? Yeah. It begins with Freya and Freya, the two first humans in this story, and it, when they started to in this mythology, they talk about the ringlands, which is a topic that you can go into, but. As I said before about the flower of life and this kind of structure that expands, the fractal kind of thing, it also it's incorporated into the society, how we build and structure the civilization. Because basically what it talks about in the Bock Saga is that we were one global society before the first Ragnarök, before the Ice Age. And we were one race of people that were connected via the offering system and this very, very complex breeding system that sort of gave the class society that originates from the heathen world. But when the first Ragnarök happened, it talks about a tilt of this planet and the change in the entire galaxy system also, which created the Tower of Babel story, sort of what Andy's touching on, that we were separated from each other, and it resulted in that we became different kind of human beings, but branching from the same origin, and created different kind of languages, and also corruption from the first original author or this kind of society structure. Based on the Bock Saga, the sound system principle. It got corrupted with the tropical kingdoms. That was 10 tropical kingdoms in this story. And we had survivors up in the north, which was the capital of the heathen world before the Ice Age, which is said to be Helsinki, Finland. And it's also said that the North Pole had its origin before the tilt in hell, or what we call today Helsinki. So from there we can see that people are different today. We have different languages, but there are also other factors into this. But it's a very big story. When I go through this like this, it can be hard to.
Now, to me, it sounds
catch,
like a different version of every creation story that we hear, except this is with a different people and a completely different location than we usually hear out of Africa or the Middle East or even Australia. But this is completely different location and based on a different type of people, right?
Yeah.
To me, it kind of feels like the Out of Africa story is like, you always have the dualistic argument, whether it's true or false. And I almost kind of think that it's true and false the way we're framing it, because the Out of Africa story is just probably much later in the story compared to
what I was going to go to. How
out.
old do we know this one is? Do we have any idea how old this is?
At least 100 million.
Yeah, that's the
100
story.
million.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking old.
Yeah, but they say that the Ice Age has been 50 million years up in the north. But if you go from the first Ragnarok, where the tilt happened and the people, because we had like a caravan system where every ringland was connected via information, and like sort of today with the internet and all of this, that we were connected in some way. Mm-hmm. And this infrastructure collapsed with this catastrophic event. But and the problem is that up here in the north, in Hell or Helsinki, that was the head or the capital of the entire heathen world that the planet was said to.
The crown.
Yeah, the crown of. So all of those ringlands outside of Hell, they were governed by Hell and the Aser family, because it's the Asgård, Midgård, this garden place where everything comes from, because every ringland around had to sort of mimic that ringland and copy from them, and it was the highest authority, sort of like a priest class or the crown of the entire civilization, so to speak. But when they get cut off from that source, it creates I can imagine a chaotic situation where you have, for example, that a separation occur when they get lost from their root. And because in this story, Frey and Freya, they came from the north, or they came from Udenma or Hell, as they say. So it sort of stem out from there, where they have been slowly populating the earth since Frey and Freya. And when they reach the entire globe, they have this sort of globalization under one race and two different languages. There was one language spoken in Hell or in Udenma, which is called the Aser language, which is basically the Swedish language today that has been preserved. And we have the Van language, which is more of the Finnish kind of language. But it's interesting, if you go into linguistic, you can see that all Germanic languages sort of have the same root. But in the tropical world, it's much more scattered. But they are very similar. You can find similarities in all languages. If you go into more hidden words, or the more taboo words, like the woman genitalia, for example, the clitoris or the clitoris is very similar in all languages on the planet.
Now, yeah, a lot of independent researchers in the past, 10, 20 years have been realizing that at one time we did have a global civilization, and we were probably wiped out many times by cataclysms. But it also, this could bring up some weird stuff about, flat Earth and all this stuff, but what do you think? Did we just have a different type of planet? Was it just kind of like a more like a Pangea type situation, or do you believe that we are completely different cosmology than the traditional space model? Which I happen to. I don't think that I think we're being lied to about all that bullshit. But I want to get your thoughts on this and the original, I guess, layout of what this planet was supposed to be during these times.
Well, I would just like to throw in real quick that I had like a particular kind of gripe or question regarding flat Earth, because I kind of hold fast to the idea of as above, so below. Mm-hmm. And I find that in sacred geometry, everything is, well, things are based on this round kind of, I don't know. I had this internal feeling, I guess, that drove me towards that something is more than just that. So I went to a guy that I could rely on when it comes to flat Earth, Mr. Eric Dubé, who has a lot of different disciplines under his belt. And I kind of, I asked him what he thought of that concept, because I know he's familiar with it, obviously. And he kind of pointed me towards the Yggdrasil tree from the heathen mysteries. And it's like, I've kind of always learned about that mystery as not describing the earth physically by any means necessarily, or the entire shape of it by any means. So I'm not sure. It's a perplexing issue, but in this story, I don't think it.
Yeah, but who in the world even drew that picture of the Yggdrasil with the plane like that? I mean, I came from the research of the Nordic. I was writing a book about Norse mythology, and I was aware of draconian forces and the more notorious forces throughout the world, and I immediately found that the perspective we give on the Norse mythology is today 100% controlled by draconian forces, draconian lodges. It's because no one has anything substantial about it. And during this time, it was like 10 years ago, I was like reading all the books and so on it. And I tried to search for the sources of it and, go to the real bottom where they get it from. And it's, it's some guy in Lund who sort of came from a backstory of Tal Mystique, as a speech mystics, where they work with voodoo and this kind of with objects, for example, with what is called bly. But anyway, a real mysterious figure from the 1800s in Sweden. And it sort of comes from the blue, all of this. And they all start with this futark stone, which is the basis for the rune writing that everyone goes with today. And the rune system derives from this futark rune system, the understanding of it. And it has been drawn from the more Hebrew alphabet. They use the same kind of system to decipher it. And this is not an origination from the actual North, you could say. I was very skeptical about it. And then I found the Bock Saga, and it gave a perfect answer to, and gave a substantial background for everything. And so this Norse mythos, drawings and everything is just fucking bullshit, if you ask me.
Now, how did you find out about the Bock Saga? And if people are interested to do their own research, how can they do so?
Well, I have a friend from Ireland called Michael Tsarion, who sort of pointed me to. He thought I was that I should take a look at the Bock Saga because I have the linguistic. And it sort of clicked instantly. It was sort of during the time when Jim Chestnut came on the YouTube and so, and I contacted him immediately, and we became very good friends and talked for like 2 hours, 5 times a week. He sort of just gave me everything he knew, but he was an American and he didn't have the language. But he had this book from the old 1900s with the English-Swedish translation. And he said you had to get a Swedish-English dictionary before the First World War to get a more correct version of what every word really means. And so that was like his Bible. But of course, me living in Sweden and is surrounded by all of this, if you go to like the old town in Stockholm, it's surrounded by the pagan symbolism that is referring from the Bock Saga, if you really know how to look at it.
Well, I was just about to ask you, what kind of evidence do we have that exists today of these original stories? Do we have anything like? Is it possible there's even a breakaway civilization that came from there, or secret societies, or something like that?
Of course, I think it's the origin of the secret societies, at least the Templars, because I've been in Sweden. We had lodges already in the 980 BC or after Christ. I mean, I sort of trace everything to Stockholm, and that's what I've been working on lately, because we can see like the heathen comeback in the 1500s in Sweden. Those old royal families from the heathen world took power. They kicked out the Catholics and sort of took control over Sweden, which was also Finland at that time. And to see what they did, because they implemented the military system that the heathen world also. The military structure that we have today is a copy of the military structure that we had in the pagan world, but it was a militarist system that created children instead.
Yeah, it was like inverted.
Yeah, it's inverted. That's what the Templars and the Freemasons does. They have this inverted, so it can be flipped 180 degrees whenever they want. But it was never really the time, I think, to go over to a more pagan structure again. So the Vasa family here in Sweden, the Vasa, only the name has a story, and the heraldry has a story. That it's all a symbolism and references to heathendom and paganism, with this animal heraldries, and all of this can be, interpreted if you have this kind of knowledge, and you can understand why they use the sword or the lance or the club or the helmet, the shield. All of those kind of symbolism doesn't have to refers to killing and weapons of war, for example. So you can sort of really trace and research this story if you have this knowledge, what it really means. Because for me, it's not a theory in my eyes.
What might help is Joakim mentioned Jim Chesner. His documentaries on YouTube are called Welcome to Hell, Welcome to Atlantis, and Welcome to Rajasthan. And those three documentaries, he takes you around like a school trip. You're walking around these areas, these old places, and he's pointing out all the old history, which is not what these symbols and statues and everything are said to represent, of course, but he's telling this old story in reference to it. And then there's big segments of kind of speaking to the audience and teaching them different parts of it. That really helped me, those three documentaries, for sure.
Yeah, it's really good. It's good to have actual eyesight on things. I mean, I'm very, you can see in just the naming of places in Sweden and Finland, it's named accordingly to the heathen society.
Yeah,
and it's still there.
It seems that it's probably been lost over the ages, mainly in part because of the sound system, and it was probably meant to be an oral tradition, and that's probably difficult to keep up over millions of years, probably.
Well,
especially with help by genocide.
Yeah, especially after global cataclysms and things like that. So we don't have any evidence of ancient writings or tablets or anything like that, right?
Well, the Baltic Sea anomaly is a very interesting one. We have been discussing that a little bit, because it sort of ties into what can it be? I think it's some kind of astrological platform, but. Yeah, like you said, the heathen society is a more wooden-based structure. They didn't want to touch the bedrock so much, and they didn't want to build things out of stone, in the sense that, they wanted. It's a very natural type of people.
Even trees
like
themselves were.
Yeah, much like
the symbols.
Native Indians, for example, they don't build by stone and all this. They move around a lot, and because we had to move a lot after the Ice Age, because it was only bedrock in Sweden after the Ice Age, and to cultivate the earth, you need to burn and grow forest and burn them down to get the soil for the crops and all of this. So at some points you need to move. So there's not so much remnants, but I saw that, you know, there are some remains, of course, that in the Archaeological Society, they have been finding a lot in the recent years. And I know that the Bock Saga crew, or the people that are really interested into the story, they are doing work in Finland, where they are doing archaeological digs. For example, with the Lemminkainen temple, which is the temple. You know, it's in the Bock Saga, they say when Moses wanted to lead the Jews to the Holy Land, or the rabbis, she was supposed, it's a her in this story, by the way, she was supposed to lead them to the Holy Land, which is in this story Helsinki, Finland, because there's a hole there where the Valhalla vault is, because of the creation myth and story. You know, here in Sweden and Finland, we have the biggest type of bedrock you can find in the world, or the deepest. It's solid rock straight through. We have no earthquakes. We have nothing like that. You know, it's the most stable ground you can be on, and they call it the Baltic Shield. But there's in the creation story, there was created like a space in the earth that is a sort of a hollow earth, probably expanding all the way down to the core, or I don't know really, but they, in the story, they carved out like a spiral walkway after this hole, or this vault that they call it, where they stored like artifacts, statues of kings and queens, and, you know, throughout the ages, throughout the pagan time, so to speak, since humanity's beginning in this story. So they are working on getting into this temple. It's a temple dome where you get into at first. It's we have to see pictures of it.
I was going to say, I could share a screen if you want.
It's under, you go sort of into a cave, and there's a water lock there, and it's supposed to be a golden door which they are trying to reach, which leads into the temple where offerings were held. And then if you follow from this temple, you can get into the storehouse and into the Valhalla vault. And they also thought that all souls were coming to this vault because of this electromagnetic, you know, spinning. If you look at the runestones from Gotland, Visby example, they have those discs with spinnings to a hole. You can see on the runes that they are talking about this centrifugal force, which they believed, you know, carried all the souls to Valhalla. And this was a very, very, very important temple within the rites of the heathen world. And they are trying to uncover this vault and this temple.
So it seems like a lot of the biblical and Abrahamic religion stories that we hear are, like you said, inversions of this original, right? Did you know that your body and well-being are being continuously threatened by something you don't even see? That threat is based on electromagnetic radiation, or e-smog. On an average day, you get exposed to 20 to 40 sources of negative EMF, such as your Wi-Fi router, Bluetooth headphones, cell towers, even the dirty electricity hidden in your walls. This radiation creates a long list of problems that impact your everyday wellness and well-being. Check out the Centropix bubble. The bubble is a breakthrough miniature active neutralizing frequency device that literally fits in your pocket. The bubble uses EMF radiation protection, which makes positive electromagnetic frequencies that are aligned with your body and the earth. The bubble is programmed and charged by impulses from a specifically developed bioresonance radiation technique. Frequencies that counter interference fields, known as electrosmog or electromagnetic pollution, are recorded as information by the bubble. Best of all, you can take the bubble with you wherever you go. Rediscover the joy and wonderful passion of being alive and reclaim your vitality and energy. Just go to getthefrequency.com or click the link in the description to get your Centropix bubble today.
Could be, yeah. But I've been thinking a little bit about this rabbi story or the Jews, because in this story, the rabbis come from India, the original Jews. And this Moses, or the Moses story they talk about, she is coming from Udenma, or the Asur family, after the Ice Age, to lead them to the Holy Land. Because the Krishna story is there too, because the first corruption of the you say the roots of Christianity, the roots of this new kind of structure where we have a wife, this society that we live in today, it's said to originate in India. But there's those rabbis, which was or rabbi, we call it. It was a title within the heathen world, and they had no job. So this Moses was supposed to lead them to the Holy Land. But at some point, something happened, I don't know. And she, of course, had the stories and probably gave it to the rabbis, or the rabbi, we say. So we can see a lot of influences from this Bock saga. If you read this Carl Borgen's book, he goes into all those side stories about the events in history, about Jesus, Krishna, probably even the Islamic figure Muhammad, they call him the Muhammad, and all those kind of stories. But they have all been affected by the pagans from the very north, or So
you were going to say something? Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention Ra as well. Like the whole Egyptian mythology that we're taught is in a way an inversion, or at least, again, like a game of telephone in a way of a breaking away of this old way, because this Ra, the sun god in Bock saga, is the firstborn son and king. And we kind of have this story of an exodus from the north and coming into this land and into this area. So we think that it's connected to Egypt as well.
Yeah.
Earlier, somebody mentioned that there's some parallels to the Atlantis story as well, where in the Atlantis story, the civilization supposedly became so advanced and destroyed itself in a way. Is there any similarities to this? There's also versions that some other civilization came and destroyed it, and maybe hijacked it.
We have many Atlantis stories. I think there's like many legitimate periods of what's called Atlantis. I think throughout time, it became a title, it became a place, it became a central location. But the Bock saga at least tells it in a way that at first it was a phonetic expression, basically describing the surroundings that they found themselves in after the first Ragnarok, or destruction, which was that Udenma, hell, was completely surrounded by ice. But, for the whole northern hemisphere was basically decimated. So all these other ringlands were destroyed, but this one in hell remained unfrozen because of the Gulf Stream coming up through Mexico and into the Gulf of Finland, keeping the water and the air warm. So they were alone, basically looking around, describing their situation as all land ice, alt lant is. And that tracks with the way the sound system works.
You can also see it like in the Europe and the more northern areas, we have a lot of land. Like in Sweden, we say Ryssland for Russia, example, and Finland for Finland, also Finland. And you can go on and see all those kind of land. Tyskland,
England,
exactly.
Ireland.
All those places has been under the Ice Age. And but in English you have like Germany, but we say Tyskland, example. Yes. So
Deutschland.
but the only one that really differs is what you call Thailand, which is it was called Siam before. So you can see a corruption there, or a change at least.
Now,
but
do you think there's any ties to existing
so
megalithic structures we have?
Sort of Atlanteans.
Do you think there's any ties to any existing of the oldest megalithic structures we find on the planet to this civilization, or you think it's all been just wiped out?
They talk about those megaliths, or it's not. What do you consider a megalith? A big stone that has been.
Well, is there any? Do you believe there's anything left from that time period?
Well, I think about the Baltic Sea anomaly there. In the Baltic Sea, you could probably find anomalies. I think.
Well, there's also an anomaly. There's also one underneath a castle up in northern Finland, is there not? Or is it northern?
Well, it's more treasures. It's more treasure. In Kajana Castle, yeah. It's buried treasure from the time of the... but you cannot date gold, so they wouldn't have any clue at all anyway. But in the temple, I mean, it's gold statues that was made in respect of the king and queen. Because they had a system of giving artifacts from throughout the ringland that was collected through one era of one Ra. So one era is about like 70 years perhaps of one king. Then you have the next king in line and so forth it goes. But through those times, they were collecting artifacts throughout the world via this caravan system that they had. Accordingly to this story, but it would be really interesting to get into this temple and see if it actually exists, so we can see the history of the human race, so to speak.
Yeah, they've already had a number of times where Bock had drawn out what they were probably going to run into as they dug into it, right? And he was correct on a number of occasions, and they were like, yeah. That's what keeps them going. I mean, from the late 80s to now, they still have more volunteers than ever before.
I think it's very sad that they didn't document those 3 stone slabs, because in the end, when they sealed according to this story, they sealed the temple 1,000 years before. So it's around 984, just before the Catholics came into Sweden and Finland. They closed the temple and they sealed it off with 3 stone slabs that were from different kind of stones. And when they started to dig at the Lemminkainen temple, they found 3 stone slabs protecting the entrance to the Lemminkainen temple. But nobody really documented this, and it's very sad. But then they also found a checkerboard on the side there, engraved into the stone. Yeah,
that's some interesting implications.
Yeah, this checkerboard thing. Yeah.
Now, I can see, especially with what we're seeing with all the agendas during our modern age, why this particular origin story wouldn't want to be out right now. White people aren't
the archaic
very
revival, right? I mean, Terrence McKenna, I mean, any hero or evil guy has talked about a return of the old, it's not really an evil versus good thing necessarily, but it's something of an old system maybe becoming more exoteric where it's been hidden this whole time. Maybe it's a flipping over of that or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
the return of the Black Sun or whatever.
Well, you can speculate endless, but it's very interesting to see, because you can see that Finland or Scandinavia, Helsinki, it was sort of the center for the information system and the infrastructure of the planet. And if you look at today, you can see that Sweden, for example, is the head of infrastructure, and throughout the world, they say that all roads lead to Rome, but all cables lead to Sweden. So it's very, very interesting that nothing gets new. It's only changing the form. And I personally believe that the rulers of the dark hidden ones, so to speak, is seated in Stockholm. And I'm working on a documentary on this, actually.
Oh, really? What could you tell us maybe a little evidence that you've come up with without giving away too much for your documentary?
Well, you can just go into their website and take a look at, it's called Wallenberg.com. It's a family that took over the banking system after the Vasa family, which I think is a heathen family. But there was an assassination in the late 1700s here in Sweden, where they took out sort of the ruling elite, because in the 1500s, when Sweden was the first to kick out the Catholics, they seized power, those old families, old heathen families, so to speak, and using the knowledge of before of human psyche and all of this. They worked a lot with symbolism and scare tactics, propaganda, all of these kind of methods that are being used today with the military structure. Also, they created. They call Gustav Adolf II the father of modern warfare. And already 160 years ago, the first telecommunication company were a Swedish sort of, the first power lines were created in Sweden, and all of this infrastructure that we see out throughout the Western world is ruled and owned by Swedish companies still today. Yeah. And the motto of the family that rules is to act without being seen, or so they have been ruling for around 200 years, 160 years, something like that, more on the paper. So, but it's getting hot for those guys today. They are being exposed, and the scandals are being. They have world domination, I think, at some point very soon. So it's very interesting to see, because everything is there to look at, and the Americans is like, what, those Wallenbergs? I know that Trump pointed out Ericsson company at one point, and he went after them. He knew about the infrastructure control that they have, because they got caught spying on the Trump campaign also. I think it's a clash of oligarchies, really. It's very interesting, because this sort of was founded during the 30 Years' War in the 1600 by Gustav Adolf II. And he had such advanced development within the military. So everyone looks like, it's like you have the more modern people coming in, and you are shooting with arrows to them. It's such an elevation within the science. And you can see Sweden is a science-based country. It's very much science,
not too far away you have Switzerland and CERN and all the very interesting opening ceremonies they've done with very heathen symbolism. The goat is and of course us in the conspiracy world, you get a million videos of it's Satanism, it's Luciferianism, but what does that really even mean, and what does that have to do with anything? And of course, I immediately think of the Bock Saga symbolism, and I'm like, well, what does this have to do with that? And does it have anything to do with the other?
The most important thing to control and rule people is to know about the psyche. And I think the pagan and the heathens, they really knew about the human, naturality, or the human psyche, or how we work. And to have this knowledge gives great power. And you can see within Sweden was sort of the example. This Sweden that I live in today was sort of the example that set the tone throughout Europe later on, I would argue, at least with this kind of bureaucracy that we have, which is if you look at the pagan world, it's also a bureaucracy, you could say. So to mimic from the pagan world, but to adjust it to the modern world is what I think the Vasa family has been doing. And when they got overthrown by the more nefarious forces, like the Illuminati, or what you want to call them, they took over the machinery and has been doing so ever since. And that's not a very long time ago. It's about 200 years ago now. And
it's weird because they're coming from the same source again. And I wonder if the wisdom of that original source is present on both sides of that,
Yeah, some people think that this is all like a big pyramid structure that we're seeing as far as the global power, but sometimes it seems that there are warring factions at the top that don't necessarily agree all the time. They can maybe come together and jerk each other off sometimes, but other than that, they're mainly in opposition. I don't know.
I think it's important to just quickly, to mention what Yake said about the old heathen way being very in touch with the psyche. I mean, to me, that immediately screams like the way we see the more natural view of spirituality and everything. It's more facing your demons and all of that kind of stuff, where you look at the entire Western world as more of a push it all down and avoid it. Don't look at anything and, you know, stay with the surface level of everything. And I think we could actually, it's kind of a separate conversation, but we could go to those roots of the human psyche and kind of get a better glimpse of what might have happened to our one family over time. You know, like how did these two mentalities, you know, they're so powerful and they seem to not be able to coexist, but they have to.
The materialistic view versus the spiritual natural view. And that's the
because
war
we're in an alchemical
right
situation here.
Yeah.
Like the physicality of our situation is absolute. You know, I personally believe that, and that's what heathenism and paganism alludes to. A lot of these alchemical ideas about reality being that this is the end of the equation, this physical form. This is the answer. This is the action that comes after the thought. So it's like very important to stick with that natural physical cycle of everything.
Right on. Now I want to go back to do we have any evidence of the nature of this cataclysm that possibly wiped out these original people?
I think it's told in pretty much every story. It's just twisted again to match this more Catholic story. The flood story, the Nephilim.
It's 3 Ragnaroks, really.
Right.
We call the cataclysm one Ragnarök, but the first is the tilt of the planet, which disconnected the people from, or the human being from each other. So we became
paradise.
It was a full tropical spinning planet, you know, in this time, they say.
Yeah, we were all dark-skinned.
the entire planet was tropical and life probably was thriving.
Yeah, you know, if you go to the north, you have 24-hour sunlight during the summer. I have that here. That was the situation, you know, all the time here up in the north, they say. But the second Ragnarök is when the glacier starts to move and it's starting to cool off. It's also a destruction. And the third Ragnarök is when the Catholics came in and slaughtered everyone in the southern Finland. Yeah,
that's what I was alluding to earlier with this kind of hijacking of our global situation. This whatever the Abrahamic religions have stemmed from seem to have had a global takeover at some time against the more natural pagans that existed before. And I think a lot of them were tricked into Christianity and Abrahamic religions from these people that, you know, told them that they were worshiping false gods, and which led to all this stuff. So
you can see it in the symbolism.
Develops. Yeah.
If you go into the Russian Orthodox Church, for example, they have a symbol of, I think it's Saint George, that is killing the dragon. He's like slaying the dragon from a horse. The dragon symbol is a heathen symbol. The serpent also, but it's killing of the dragon system, which is really the offering system, I would argue. And it's a pagan, so you can see straight into the symbolism that he is killing the dragon, and that's killing of the offering system and the pagan system in general, you know, or it's the basis of that civilization to keep it intact. It's not a tyrannical type of system in that way. It's more of I think we can't really understand the connection between people because everyone was genetically connected very close. Right. Some would say it's incest, but it's really not. It's a system where everyone is a family. Connected by offering systems of seed from the male and the sov from the female, or the, you know, we don't know.
From what you were saying earlier, it seems like they had a better understanding of human DNA and how we, you know, our biology and how this would work with mating and offspring.
And human history. I think they were really connected with the roots, with Frey and Freya. We even have days attributed to those, like Friday or Fredag. We have, you know, this it's put into the calendar. So yeah, I think the people was very aware of their past and history, and the female had a really big role in this society. It was 50-50. We have the Hexa or the witches, which was, they had their role and the males had their role, very like separate. That's what really tribal means, or tribal. Tribal is 3 different spheres within the society. You have the male sphere, the female sphere, and one sphere where we did stuff together, or a more, that's what tribal really means for me. It's a system where the females are respected as one sphere and the males as one equally, and the sphere where we concocted everything.
Do you think these
More
people
alchemy.
were physically different than modern humans? I imagine
Can't
they
say.
were. They may
The
have
only
been
thing we
white.
have in the box, the only thing we have in the box saga is the hypothetical origin of the Caucasians and the white race, basically from that Atlantis period, the all land ice period, where we were trapped there, unlike we had ever been before, and unlike the southern kingdoms that were still existing and okay during that time period. Just like the Arctic animals, we became brighter skinned, we lost the melanin, we got blue and green eyes, blonde hair, red hair. And I mean, if you watch those documentaries from Jim Chesner, he even goes into detail about the red hair and the more blonde hair, the Don and Sven line, that 2 different lines that create different white races. And it's pretty intense, because then you go into these other the other mythologies from these other countries, and you find these similar stories that would connect right to what Chesner was saying. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Like the Tuatha De Danann, the Tuatha De Anu, you have Scythia, you have Scotland, Ireland. It's
The magic
all connected. Yeah,
the
they're all
magic
connected.
really happens when you start to invest time into it by yourself, because you can sort of approach it from all kinds of angles, this research. And it's it's, you can be sort of one Hitler on the subject because of the sound system, but it's really nice to see that people can contribute. Andy talked to me, or he did a mention in our chat about there was some kind of video you saw, or it was a new video on the Bock Saga, right? Andy, coming out, and you were like, we need to debunk this. We need to talk about this.
Well, not to debunk it, but we need to at least go. This guy makes a lot of, he brushes things off. And a lot of times when he brushes it off, it's because he's clearly trained in the established story of history. And you run into that a lot. And unfortunately, even with alternative history, we're holding on to a certain level of what's been written and shown to us and given to us and pushed on us, even to justify these alternatives that we talk about a lot of times. In the Bock Saga, it seems to kind of wipe out all the alternatives and just paint it in a completely different light. And that's what attracted me to it originally.
Right. Now,
Dan, it was the tribe of Dan, what got him into it, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's what connected me into all the folklore. Dan got me attracted to all that stuff.
Right on. This is like an onion you have to unpeel. There's so many layers to this. In closing, is there anything that you think the audience should know, anything else important about these stories that we should get into?
We haven't even gotten into any story.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it. We got 30 minutes left, so let's see what we can do in 30 minutes.
Well, just on the popular side, we don't even have to spend too much time on it, but anybody interested in ancient aliens should be looking into the Bock Saga and be saying ancient Aryans instead, and just take a look from that angle.
Yeah, but just this notice when they have been doing translations, or our understanding that it's up there, from the heavens, from all of this, the heavens. If you look at it from another perspective, you can be from up there or on the top. It doesn't really be necessarily. It can just be a little misinterpretation in some book somewhere where they say the heavens, or it means the top. Stuff like this. I always used to say that we should revisit what we have been studying before that gotten into the interest. I mean, if you're listening to this show, you have started your journey somewhere, and it often starts with, like, for me, it started with the Egypt. When I went to Egypt when I was a child, and I saw these huge structures there in Karnak, and there was goat's head everywhere, lined up, and just this fascination of what kind of people has been making this, and what kind of civilization has been living here, how did they live and all of this. But to go and revisit what you already have been visiting from before that you thought was interesting, and to have another look at it. I mean, this ancient alien stuff with everything has to be aliens, like Andy said, just.
And they're all tall, white, blonde hair, blue eyes, no matter what continent you're talking about.
I think Dan has he's really good with this with the crest of, I don't know. I can't even explain the fucking names of stuff, man. Yeah. Don has gone in a little bit to into this before to see, like in the Indian culture, you have some weird kind of alien creature coming and giving them wisdom and all of this. It's all in the Bock Saga also. They sent out those ambassadors all over the world and gave sort of technologies, but not technologies, but how to farm the domesticated animals and all of this kind of technologies, as they call it, or we can call it that, whatever. It's an enrichment to build civilization in that sense. But you have all those kind of stories of strange beings coming and visiting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Stitchin Van Donegan stories that could have been originally put into this format with these original peoples. It's the same thing as all the biblical stories that Ancient Aliens perceives as aliens coming through. It's just another telling of history, but possibly a very original telling of history, it seems.
Yeah, you got to kind of go with Occam's razor. I don't mean to say that that's like the best and only way to do things, but when you can kind of start with a human story, like, if you have to leave it and go into the woo-woo, I'm cool with that. But I think if you should stay within the human possibility first, and
that's
see
the most
how
obvious,
far you
I would
can go
think.
with it. Yeah. Right. Just see how far it can go. Like, I'm looking into, and this is where Dan helped me out with the Tuatha De Danann. I started looking into my Irish heritage and seeing fairy people and the fae folk and starting to line it all up with these fucking white people that were clearly there. So
I think Dan should shoot on this.
Yeah, definitely. Dan, please.
What you got?
I mean, what aspect? There's so many aspects to get into, but yeah, I was kind of just studying Tribe of Dan, and then once I heard about Dan and Sven and that split, it kind of reminded me too of like the Bible of Esau and Jacob, and it even describes Esau as being born with hairy and red hair, and you kind of get this idea of him giving up his lineage to his brother, and then his brother becomes king, and then that's Jacob, and then that kind of goes into Dan, and then how Dan has been this mercantile class and the Phoenicians and all these other different people throughout time, the sailors who have gone around to these different areas and kind of revitalized civilization, brought them crops, brought them sciences and all these other things. And then you also have that in the Hopi story of the ant people. And then like what Joakim was talking about earlier, how it's a very natural thing of like even the mounds, the mound building society. If you look at that from like an underground coming up, they're coming up from the ground like they're ant people through the mounds. You have these mounds all over. So you have this idea of these ant people maybe coming from underneath. And I'm just kind of going over a bunch of stuff, but in the Sumerian, you have garden, the Garden of Eden. Gar is like life, and Den is like the lower home or the inside or inner part of the earth, the caverns. So the Garden of Eden would be anywhere that life cropped up or began again. So when you have this ringland system, you can have a Garden of Eden in many different places, which would have been the centers of these different ringlands, or the navels, the Nephilims, the naval homes of these different civilizations that existed. So when we go through, we talk about Atlantis, and we talk about, Atlantis was the Rishat structure. Atlantis was America. Atlantis was Norway, Sweden,
Florida.
Atlantis was the Mediterranean Sea. Well, yeah, it was all of these places, because Atlantis was a time period that existed at this time when people are coming out and giving is an expanse of technology. When you look into the alien story too, you get this expanse of technology. We're trading technology for something else, right? So you kind of have all of this in this story. And the nice thing about the Bock Saga is it takes away all of this like woo-woo, like angel god stuff, and it brings it back more to human origins of everything, rather than like the gods that came from the other planets or these angelic beings. Like when you really look at an angel, what is an angel? An angel is a bright shining being with that's enlightened and has knowledge and is bringing people knowledge, helping people out. But you also have a dark side of the angel too. You have a light and a dark side of everything from and everywhere. But you, the shining people, the fairies, the fae folk. I mean, even when you get into like Europe, you have the Anglos, the Anglo-Saxons. That that
English language, man.
Angel. It's a circle.
But I think
well, it's an angle also.
Yeah, but
because the female, when she opens the angle,
right. I think an important caveat to mention though is that like this is also a way that they kind of mind control us when it comes to like spirituality, because they know that there's an undeniable archetype inside all of us that is this human spirit of some kind, this higher realm. Even I would say that they're probably in line with this, talking about Udin and Udinma and the energy coming from the sun and existing inside of them. And, the retention of the sperm is a very similar tradition to a lot of ecstatic practices in the Eastern lands and everything. So this is all kind of tied into our inner experience, and that's the best place to hit us. So if you can twist history with those internal archetypes, with our hero's journey that exists inside all of us, then you're forever going to have a complete mixture and mix match of the literal and the allegorical aspects of this story, and what it means on a physical historical level, and what it means for humanity itself, and this, our spirit and our collective energy and our story.
That's what
that made any sense.
Yeah, let's just pick a quick note on that. That's what the Draconians really do. Like the Draconian lodges, they work on the highest level, on the more spiritual level, where they try to rewrite history to a new kind of format. So when we look at history in symbolism or whatever, they change the sperm to blood, for example.
Yes.
And they change the sword from being a phallus symbol to become like a weaponry, or this is the way they invert history and try to take control over the history and portray the new Draconian way. Because if you look at the Draconian sources or where they come from a little bit with this blood sacrificing cult shit, I would say or argue that it's very gnostic also, because it's very supernatural, and it's sort of the agents to go into a country after they conquer it to sort of rewrite or re-rise. What do you call it? When you re-portrait the history and the image?
Re-legion.
Yeah. You re-legionize.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. You look at all this stuff, and it checks so many boxes, and I resonate with a lot of this stuff. I want to go back to a second for to the human aspect that may not be aliens helping us create this stuff, but the possibilities that we had advanced knowledge of plant medicines and psychedelics, and we use these to maybe commune with the other side, whatever we would consider paranormal, and get information that way on how to create and build societies and things of that nature. What do you think about that?
I think that's in line perfectly with the analogy that's told in the creation myth of the Bock Saga, where they're literally gaining all of this from, and of course they're using the sun as the archetype, but I think it means more to them than just this physical life-giving thing, because when it transmutes to them everything that's going to give them the power to give life, I don't know, it sounds more transcendental than just physical, but I could be wrong there.
Well, talking about the technology, I think sound was a key component that they really expanded on, because they talk about moving stones and megalithic, big, huge stones. I think they moved on those they knew how to resonate and create the frequency to move things via sound frequency and such. So they could, it's at least move stones and such. because the Lemminkainen temple, the entrance there, is not a natural formation. And you can also see, if you throughout Sweden and Finland, that there are balance stones. So they put a big, huge stone on top of 3 stones, like balancing stones, and this kind of things. Looks like a Sunday activity almost.
Yeah, I 100% believe sound and frequency is probably one of the most important aspects of our reality. I think that's why they actually changed the tuning of modern music, so we wouldn't have access to some of that knowledge about how powerful sound is.
Yeah, I made continue.
We're talking a lot about like natural instinct, right? And like a people that existed maybe 100 million years ago. Think about how much closer to a natural instinct they would be, just like animal instinct. Animals, like, they don't really have a big complex brain. They just naturally do what they're supposed to do because it's what's inside of them. It's just their instinct to do that. And humans, I think, were probably a lot the same way. We were a lot closer to nature. We always talk about civilization and how civilization brought us away from nature, and how since we've deterred from that, we have gone down and down and down as a civilization of as far as like intelligence and whatnot. Like now we use technology to replace all of these things that we had instinctively beforehand, right? So we have gotten away from that instinct. So when we were closer to instinct, we probably understood what sound was, vibration was, speech was. We knew how all these things were and existed because we were closer to that, because that was the source, and we were closer to source back then than we are now. And now we're farther away, and now we have to find these other ways to try to get back to it.
Yeah, these artificial ways where it's like, you know, when you hear the stories of the South American cultures learning from the plants, whispering to them on how to mix 2 different plant species together in the right way out of 50 million species to create an edible oral DMT, you know, ayahuasca. That was the plants whispering to them. Now, I've heard it, of course, described as like, well, that's fallen angels whispering to them. And in a way, you could probably relate that right into the voices of nature that they were in tune with, perhaps. You know, they were more in line with this natural order, which is the heathen order, which is evil now. So it is demonic. It is the fallen angels.
In the Bock Saga, they talk a lot about the ödet, or it's destiny, but it's not really destiny, but it's öde. But to align with öde, or to sort of give up the ego, but not really like that either. But there's a current or force, an cosmic force, or whatever you want to call it, that sort of puts you into the right way. But you need to be receptive of it, and
now I know I'm going to be looking for inversions in language, like, you know, heathen. I always think of heathen as I used to think of it as an evil person. They're not civilized, and they're heathens. They're evil.
Well,
but now
wait
it's,
till you start thinking about like Baal, or the bull god offering Well, you know, when you have the offering system, you have the offering system where you're consuming your own sperm, which it would literally be your future children. I don't know if there's a direct connection there, but it seems like an interesting one, you know, a horned god consuming children.
Inversion. This is what the Draconians does.
Healthy. What other words have health? Hello.
Helig. Holy. We have hel means complete in Swedish.
Yeah.
Or hell.
Man. Yeah. It seems like anything has been done to keep us from remembering and knowing who and what we really are as humans.
Yeah.
And there's little signposts too, like, you know, when hell freezes over is like a thing that will never happen, right? And that's literally the Bock Saga's story about this place called hell.
Yeah,
it's
man.
Like, what is that doing in our modern cultural lingo, you know?
I think right now, with all the revelations coming out, is one of the most important times in our history that we actually might be able to get a glimpse of who we really were in these times. So this is great, man. I love this story. I got a much better understanding of it now. Anything else we should talk about before we close out?
The birds and the bees. The raw bee,
Shit.
the raw bee pollinates the different ringlands of the swans. The swan and the bee, the birds and the bees.
Everything
That's-
is
I mean,
nature symbolized. Yeah.
the-
Yep.
Yes.
So
It's
we
a
always
very-
say we're going
it's
to
a
tell
very
our kids
deep
the birds and
story,
the
but-
bees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
people
where
need to invest
because
their own time into
Ro-
this.
we're always like, where the birds and the bees come from? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why? How does a bee and a bird like get it on and have sex or whatever? But this is what the idea is the pollination of the different ringlands to the different swans. The swan in these different ringlands, who is the goddess type. So when you look into mythology and you see all this goddess worship and these goddess the goddess worship, even divine birth can be attributed to this fact. Is they were taking the collection of the sperm and inseminating themselves rather than having somebody have sex with them. So you can have an immaculate conception that way.
Yeah, man, it seems like they had the key to a peaceful, prosperous society that was infiltrated a long time ago, and we've been trying to get back to there since then. This is a wonderful story, guys. Before we head out, everyone let the audience know where they can find your work, your podcast, everything you got going on. Start with Andy.
I'm Danunnaki Dan, rising from the ashes. We talk about ancient history, esoteric history, consciousness, religion, all that kind of stuff. We do theme months on Rising from the Ashes, and you can find us wherever podcasts are available.
Right on. What you got, Andy?
Oh, yeah. Andy Rouse from the Deep Share podcast. Dan and I do a show on Patreon as well called The Deep Chill, where we kind of do deeper research into different parts of history and different people's interpretations of different time periods and different places and relate it back to what we've learned through these Northern stories. So that's pretty fun to do. Take a look at that. But yeah, I'm putting out episodes every week on consciousness and history and kind of pulling the lid off of the government disclosure shit, because I'm really into that. UFOs are close to my heart. And even though I know now that it's kind of a different story than I grew up with, but yeah, catch me on doing all that kind of shit.
Right on. And Joakim.
Yeah, I have this YouTube where I only put it on YouTube. It's called Hagström, and I sort of more focus on the 1500s and on to all leading up to today. And only focusing on Sweden mostly, but I think it's so much to focus on there. And this is sort of a sidetrack from the Bock saga, but it sort of has its ties to it. But I try to separate them. But otherwise, I've been doing a lot of things on Unslaved and been on both Dan and Andy's podcast and other podcasts too. So I'm sort of a split person in that way. I don't talk too much about the Bock saga, but you can find my work where I now is going full steam ahead against or exposing the controllers of Sweden, but it seems to be that they control much, much, much more. And it's very interesting, and you can sort of follow my exploration there if you like. Hagström, you can
Awesome,
type in.
man. Well, we're definitely going to have to do another collaboration, guys. This was great. We can do this again in the future, go some different directions for sure. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. I had an awesome time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
man.
Chris. Appreciate
Until
it,
next
man.
time,
Thank you, man.
everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.